Welcome to the Phoenix Prosperity Podcast, where wealth meets legacy. Join your host, Tim Fergestad, as we explore the journeys of Phoenix's finest to success and beyond.
Hello, this is Tim Fergestad. Thank you for joining us. I'm very pleased to have Sara Gullickson with me here today. Sara is an entrepreneur, investor, and corporate deal maker with more than a decade of experience building and scaling businesses personally and professionally. Welcome to the show, Sara.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So before we get into your journey and how your background and all the forces that made Sara, let's get a quick snapshot of your business right now for context.
Absolutely.
Thank
So
you.
right now, what we're doing is we are working specifically in request for proposal or request for application, so RFP or RFA processes across the United States for cannabis. And so cannabis has obviously gone corporate. So our old business model of local client service is no longer a fit for the industry. And so now we're working with just a lot of investors that have a will or a want to, spend money in the cannabis industry to make a return on their investment in the cannabis industry.
Okay, but what role does your company play in that? Is it finding retailers, setting up those shops, or
So I
linking the
spend
wholesalers?
most of my time lobbying and
Mhm.
working with the legislators and the lawmakers to better understand programming or different program needs, to understand how to create safe access for cannabis within whatever community that is. For example, right
Okay.
now we're working in Nebraska, we're working in Texas. Once I feel that the program is a good investment, I will go out and raise capital for those projects, and we will put together capital with the local groups in the state that we feel have good entrepreneurial success in the state. And then my firm does basically all of that. So we do, the PPMs, the operating agreements, the decks, um, and really, the organizational structure, bring the capital in. And then we also we're the people that are doing the RFPs. So, or the RFA. So the request for proposal or request for application. So basically showcasing standard operating procedures, business plan, financial performas to submit to the government to say, hey, pick us because we're capitalized and we have the knowledge and know-how to do this. So we're basically merging industry experience, capital with local entrepreneurs in states that are launching a cannabis program, whether that's medical, recreational, or low THC.
Okay. Okay. So which organizations at the state level do you have to work with to
So it
do that?
depends. Sometimes the department, like right now, the Department of Public Safety is running Texas's program.
Okay.
The Liquor Board is running Nebraska's program. Sometimes it's the Board of Taxation, and sometimes if the state has enough funds, they will create their own cannabis commission. So it's wildly different. Every single state really functions a lot differently.
Well, that's fun and exciting to
It's
have the
it's
root.
always exciting.
Okay, so when you say pick me, you're in terms of giving you a license or something like a certification, or out of a group of other people who are all trying to get this approval?
Yeah, so cannabis in the states that we specialize in, they'll have a limited amount of licenses. So if you're
Okay.
picturing like Colorado, where it's gone weed crazy and cannabis is everywhere, that's not the states that we really work in. Same thing with California. Those states don't have a limit on how many licenses are available. We work on the state projects that say, hey, as the state of Texas, we're giving out another 12 licenses. As the state of Nebraska, we're giving out another 20 licenses. And so
Okay.
we're going for the high ticket, high value cannabis license. A good example on what I like to compare a cannabis license to is a liquor license, or even taxi medallions back in the day. So you have to have this high value license before that you won basically from the government, before you start building your real estate and before you start dispensing or growing cannabis. If you do any of those activities prior to a license, that makes you a drug dealer and you go to jail.
Well, okay. So let's move back to Arizona for a second. So I know, is it like a liquor license in Arizona? You have one license, it's one good for one location, or can you have
The rules,
multiple?
that's a good comparison. The rules and regulations are different in every state. So
Okay.
some licenses allow you to, for example, Arizona, you can cultivate, you can process, meaning make, edibles and vapes, um, and then you can also dispense. In some of the other states, like Ohio, for example, where I just sold one of my licenses, it's separate licenses for cultivation, manufacturing, and retail.
Right.
And so typically those retail licenses allow one location. However, again, it's in Pennsylvania. If you win one retail, you get three outlets. So
Hmm.
it is very
Okay.
confusing. And one of the reasons that I'm, special or people hire us or partner with us is because I've been through the journey of cannabis. I've been in the industry 15 years. So I can take all my industry knowledge and build upon to say, okay, Pennsylvania was like this, Ohio was like this,
Right.
Nebraska was like this, or is going to be like this. And that's a lot of the intel that the government needs to say,
Right.
hey, what kind of program would work well in your environment? And
Right.
so we take a very high level customized approach for the, lobbying. And then we also ensure that our, request for proposal is not like this copy and paste thing. It's very, very highly customized to what the state is looking for.
Okay.
So Texas being a border state, guess what they want? They want really high security. So every state has different needs on what is making them tick, meaning how the legislation got passed and what the legislation looks like.
Right. And does your team work with the government closely? Do you have attorneys there, or is it on your
We've got
team?
it all. We've got
Okay.
it all. So we have a lot of attorneys. We have a lot of lobbyists. Typically, you're
Hmm.
hiring a lobbyist for each state that's kind of networked in or ingrained into,
Right.
the powers.
Right.
And a lot of times, like in one of the states we're working in right now, they're really struggling with their program. This is not something that the government wanted, but it's something that the people passed by ballot initiative. And
Okay.
so, I'll fly in and I'll have a meeting and be like, hey, we know this is something scary. We know this is, something that you don't necessarily want. How about looking at some of these parameters to control somewhat part of the outcome that you're scared about? So if security is your, number one concern, okay, let's beef up the security section. Let's make the people produce different, plans. Or if you're really wanting, not the corporations to come in, let's limit that. Let's make sure that you have bonus points for in-state residency. And so every state, it's just like it's a stupid example, but I always use it. It's like baking a cake. So they have the same, butter, sugar, flour, but if you're baking a red velvet cake versus a carrot cake, you're going to throw in a couple different ingredients. So the
Okay.
baseline of the request for proposal or request for application is always the same. It's just kind of what flavors we're throwing into it to bake this, exact cake that Nebraska
Sure.
wants.
Okay. Okay. Moving back to Arizona, so is Arizona a license for growing and dispensing and everything all at once? Or I kind of
Yes.
remember some people were just focusing on growing and then they couldn't sell it, so they were kind of gambling that the law would pass, and then they were annoyed that the legislation was dragging their feet because they like for years they were like having to not, as you said, it's illegal to do anything with it. So they were
So
um
we had a caregiver model in the beginning, which was like I could be a caregiver if I was located in the right place and I could give medicine to somebody, but I couldn't sell my medicine to somebody.
huh.
And then when the state and the legislators kind of shook out and we published rules, regulations, and in a program, there's still like caregivers some places in Arizona, meaning where they're far enough from a dispensary where they can still share medicine or grow medicine, but they can't sell it. But the model was really not created for the caregiver model. That was
Right.
the people wanted this and they passed something in the interim because cannabis programs from soup to nuts, meaning legislation to actually opening doors, a really tight turn on that's like 24 months. So,
Okay.
it's a long time to basically, go through the legislative process, submit the RFPs, have the RFPs graded, and then get to work and, do construction and hiring and actually opening up a brick and mortar store.
Okay. Right. I remember the guy, I talked to him. Anyway, he had a location on like Union Hills and 83rd for years before he could open and do business. And I don't remember what if so he had the property and I think he was just waiting for the law to I think he had like he was in line. He had a place for when it was legal that he could start selling, but he you know what I mean? It's like he had the license before he could use it type of scenario.
Well,
Was
a
that a
lot of
thing?
times if you have like a license in hand, you're
Hmm.
waiting on the municipality. So
Okay.
you can't just have like state approval and be like, hey, I'm setting up a shop on, Scottsdale Road in Camelback where
Okay.
Fashion Square is. You have to do it in the municipality or city or
Their
whatever
guidelines.
jurisdiction.
Right.
And you have to get special use permits and building permits. And so again, it's a long process.
Okay. Okay. What are some of the misconceptions about the industry that you're still dealing with?
I think that we're printing money. Like this is such an expensive business. Even prior to understanding if you get a license, some of our bids we spend 500,000 to 1 million on prior to even knowing that we won the license. And I think the amount of like compliance activities and red tape that we have in the industry, there is such a misconception. I mean, you have to have consultants on your payroll. You have to have an attorney on your payroll. You have to have money set aside for our taxes, which we're not considered normal businesses. We're treated like drug dealers. And so that's some of the federal conversation that's taking place right now with people wanting to deschedule, or people wanting, fair banking and things like that. And, I think for me, people think I'm like, I don't think I'm negative. I think I'm overly positive about certain things, but in the industry, I have a plan A, B, and C. Because at any given moment, the government can change something
Mhm.
that they didn't do right because they have never done this before that can
Right.
cost you a couple 100,000. And so we're constantly dealing with like, fires, right? And so I think if you want to be an investor in the industry or if you want to be in the industry, you have to have thick skin. I was on a different podcast and they were like talking about my childhood, and I was like, there is no way anyone would have ever painted me to be like this person. Like I was creative, I was carefree. And so the industry kind of like roughs you up a little bit where you become, very factual, very linear, like I have no emotions when it comes to business anymore because I'm like, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. Like you can't fall in love with a project. You just can't. It's not the way that it works. You can be in love with your project, but that can't, trump kind of all of the other things that you need to be very linear on. And so I think being a woman in the industry is really interesting because people aren't used to women functioning like that. They're really not. They're used to more of like the nurturing role and the mothering
Right.
role and, getting, wildly emotional about certain things. And I'm like, just like, nope, I'm getting in there, getting my job done, collecting the facts and, turning it into what I need to turn it into.
Right. Right. Well, 15 years in any industry will help do that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I still love it though. It's like this thing where it was like when I had my son, I had stepped down as the CEO of a publicly traded company and just really didn't want to do that anymore. And then I was like, do I even want to be in the industry anymore? And it took me a little bit because I was like, if I'm not passionate about it, then I need to do something else.
Okay. Okay. Um, okay, so let's go there. Where did Sarah start, and how did you get into the space?
So I grew up in the Midwest, just like you. I grew up in a small suburb, about 200,000 kids. I was actually severely dyslexic. And so my parents, like I said before, if they had to bet on what I did for a living, it would not be produce intellectual property and draft 1,000-page bids. But I had, my dad was an entrepreneur. I had gone to work after getting my degree. And I really thought, like, this is for the birds. Like, who can live on like 32,000 a year? Like, I had a brand new townhouse in Old Town Scottsdale. And so I was like, how am I going to make my lifestyle work on like this kind of a salary? So I was like, you know what? I'm going to just get a couple clients freelance. It was back when people didn't really understand Facebook, really didn't understand how to do newsletters. Internet marketing was like somewhat new at that point for small businesses, at least, right? And so I represented a handful of clients, spas, salons, health facilities, plastic surgeons, gyms. And that was kind of my niche. And I would prospect for clients on Craigslist because on Craigslist, that's where you would post a job post for like a part timer instead of like a full time, salary that you have to pay benefits. So there was a ad and it was like market for pot. And I was like, marketing for pot. Okay, like what could go wrong, right? So I did the interview. I came from a naturopathic household. My sister had a
Okay.
really rare blood disorder, so I just thought like, hey, if a plant can make you feel better, like why wouldn't you do it? So
Right.
my understanding of what this was not taboo or foreign. I was just like, that makes perfect sense. So that's when Arizona was legalizing. And then I got really into the industry. I realized that, not necessarily being good at school or, college or, some of the other things because of my learning disability, like business was really natural for me. And it was like almost like I could envision the puzzle fitting together before, a client could even get it out of their mouth. So it's really where I found my place to shine. And so I made it a commitment early on that like the reason I wanted to do it was not to become a gazillionaire, was not to, end up in jail like a lot of the Ponzi schemes and things like that people have in the industry. It was to make history. And so how would I do that? I would talk to legislators and I would help parents get access for their children, or I would help families get access for their cancer. And so that's really how I started. And I just really looked at it as what it was, medical. When things started going recreational, there was a period of time where I kind of had a hard time with that. And because I was really, building the industry from a medical standpoint.
Right. Right.
So I think that my progression in the industry was like really natural. I'm sure you listen to podcasts, and like I think if something's for you, even if you pass up on it the first time, it will find you.
Right.
And so I really do believe, even though it sounds kind of cheesy, like this was my calling. Like, why else am I so good at it, right? And it's always come somewhat natural, right?
Okay. Okay. So how did you overcome like the challenge of embracing the recreational side or other challenges in the industry?
Yeah, so all the rules and regulations and medical conditions in each state are different. And so studies started coming out for like menstrual cramps or depression or anxiety. And if those weren't a qualifying medical condition, you couldn't get access. So I just kind of was like, okay, who am I to tell you if it's helping people for different things? Like, why am I the judge and the jury to like, say only this person should have it or only that person should have it? And so I think that's how, the recreational industry made sense to me, because, if people are using it for different things that aren't qualifying medical conditions, or even if somebody's using it to chill out at the end of the night instead of drinking a bottle of wine, like I can tell you which thing is healthier,
Right.
So I think that was just kind of a natural progression where when recreational cannabis came down the pipe, we were all like, oh, what is this? What does it look like? And then, you just have to educate yourself.
Right. Right. Okay. Interesting. It's a weird. I'm not an expert in this either, and so it's been a cultural challenge maybe to say, oh, we're in
Absolutely.
America. You're free to do what you want with your own body and all that stuff, as long as it doesn't hurt other people or impair, But then it's like, well, what about meth? What about which
I
drug?
think there's
Which
studies on the certain things, and I think that some drugs, even that are still prohibited, have good studies on them.
right,
And I think that there are some drugs that probably will never be legal because there just isn't enough good data.
right, right. Okay, so back to company stuff. What are the big goals for the rest of 2025?
So we are like busier than we've ever been, in the sense that more states are legalizing. And what's interesting is the states that we're working in right now are dry states going medical,
Okay.
which that hasn't happened a ton over the last 5 years. And so I'm going back to my roots of meeting with the, states to say, hey, this isn't as scary as you think it is. And here's what some of the other states have done. And so, there were a lot of dry states like Nebraska, like Texas, that really drug their feet on this, that did not want it. We did some research. It was about a year ago, and I was like, my whole entire career, everyone's like been like, what are you going to do when, RFPs dry up? And I always kind of giggled because I was like, that's not really going to happen. And guess what? 15 years later, it has not happened. So a year ago, when we were, doing an investment prospectus, what I wanted to showcase to, the potential investors was the fact that only half of the United States to date has access to recreational cannabis. So what does that tell you? 15 years in the industry, even if it speeds up a bit, I have another 10 years of doing RFPs specifically in dry states going medical. And so there's a lot of work to be done still, and I don't think people really understand that. The Carolinas are still dry. There's a lot of states that are Iowa, in my opinion, is still, it has low THC, but it still doesn't have a medical program. So there's a lot of, really like, especially Texas. I mean, Texas population is, astronomical, like it's huge. And
Yeah.
so building out a program like that for that many people, takes a really special skill set, and it takes a really special group that wins the license to be, able to roll it out in a way that's, it's 20, 30, 40 million dollars to do so, right?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned the last 5 years haven't seen a lot of change. So is it like 10 years of growth and then it sort of leveled off over the COVID
Well,
and now it's starting to go up again?
COVID was a little setback in the industry, or it was a pretty big setback in the industry, because what happened is there was a long time when people couldn't collect signatures. So unless it was
Huh.
passed, by the government, it wasn't being passed by the people. And so we weren't slow necessarily. I think the right way to describe it is we're a lot busier right now because we're not turning a state from medical to recreational, meaning an environment that understands what this is and isn't. We are literally going from a dry environment, meaning no cannabis whatsoever, and
Right.
then starting a medical program. And that's a heavier lift. It requires much more time, much more energy, meeting with, mayors and lobbyists, and it's a much more intense project, if that makes sense.
Sure. Sure. Has anybody gone straight from dry to recreational?
I don't think so. I mean,
Okay.
states like Oklahoma, like it might as well be recreational because it's like a free for all.
Huh.
Because they did like unlimited licenses, and it was like, crazy making. But I don't believe there's been one state. I think they've tried to pass it like that through ballot initiative. But I mean, my saying on that is you have to crawl before you walk, right?
Right. Right. And sometimes it might be a little bit like Trump negotiation, right? You ask for a lot and then you back up and you take you take the medical.
Absolutely. Some of these bills that we see, we're like, oh, why is this even in here? And it's like,
Right.
oh, you had to have it to get it passed, which 10 times out of 10, that's why a bill has, different things in
Right.
it. And it was
Yeah.
what it took to get it over the finish line.
Right. Right. The concessions are what they really wanted in the first place.
Right.
Right. So can you speak a little bit to your bigger personal goals, Sarah, right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of my biggest personal goals is I'd like to retire from the industry in the next 5 years.
Okay.
I'd like to figure out another business model that makes sense. We're already starting to work on some artificial intelligence projects that won't be just cannabis related. They'll be more global, for like kind of the government side of things. And so I'm already starting to kind of chip away at those goals. But as these states that are or dry and they're going medical, it's exciting to me. I like putting those kind of projects together. So, I want to exist in this space as long as it still feels good and as long as I feel like I'm making a difference. But I know that once I have the time to take a step back and say, what else do I want to be when I grow up? I'd like to have kind of like a passion project or a not for profit or nonprofit, one of the two.
Okay. Right.
Or, maybe something that is more in like the realm of life that I'm in, which is, children.
Right. Yep. Yep. That's it seems to be our natural trend, right? You see celebrities, right? They have families and all of a sudden they're writing children's books and then
Right.
they shift into different phases.
I've looked at a lot of kids' models, and with the amount of money that I can make in the industry. It just hasn't made sense to officially make the jump, but I'm hoping I have another, sale that's more career ending and then I can do kind of like the more passion
Right.
side of the project.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Um, have you done anything in the last 12 months that's changed your life? Kind of a legacy question.
Don't know. Like you have kids and they're older. And so I'm sure you feel a little differently when they're older, but like, I mean, raising these kids is, I feel like a huge responsibility in that, in the sense that like I take my son to my investor's office to pick up the check. I bring him to the bank to ensure he understands like money and business. And what I've been seeing a lot in the world is, especially in the wealthier areas, I really feel like we're not preparing our children to be equipped to be business owners. And so that's something that I've, held with a high standard in my household. Like my kids know that I work. And so, I think right now my greatest legacy I'm creating is them. And that doesn't mean make a gazillion
Right.
dollars to pass it down to them so they have this cake life. It's like, how do I get, of course, that's great. And I want to give them some money, but I also want to ensure that they understand real estate investments, that they understand what corporate structure is. And so a lot of my time and energy at this time time in my life, a lot of it's dedicated to them.
Right. Yes. Great point, Sarah. I agree. I think a lot of people think of inheritance or heritage as something you leave to your children instead of what you leave in them. Right.
Yes.
And the values. And I think you make a great point with entrepreneurship because that encompasses a lot of the values you need to get by in this day and age. And as an entrepreneur, you have to provide value. You have to help people. You have to, right, solve problems and all that. And it sounds like you're pretty dialed in on that. So yeah, I think you'll pass on a lot of those really well.
Hope so. I don't know. The verdict's out. I'll let you know when they turn, 18 or 22 or 25
Right.
when they get their first job
Yeah. So
or
yeah,
start their first company.
right.
That's
My
really
first
what
just
I want for them. I think that we breed certain people to be really great employees. And I think entrepreneurship came natural to me because it was bred in me. I watched my dad live it, eat it, sleep it, breathe it every single day. And so I'm hoping at least one of them, has that love for entrepreneurship like I do.
right. Right. Excellent. That's good stuff. Good stuff. Um, I was gonna joke and say, yeah, I think I've done all right, but we'll have to see if my kids need therapy someday once they all fly the nest and
We all get to
see
need
how they
therapy,
do.
like either it's in a way of like a yoga retreat or taking a eat, pray, love trip or, talking to somebody. I feel like a lot of what I do in my entire entrepreneur journey has been like my focus has largely been on myself and my mental health because if I'm not intact, how can
Right.
I expect what I'm creating remain intact?
Right.
And so there's been certain points in my career where I've needed like more help or less help. And there's even been some times in my career where I've said, I'm not going to take another project for a month because I need to reset. And I think that for anyone, whether you have a job, a family, a business, no matter what you're working on, I think that personal development and or, therapy, whatever you disguise that as is very important.
Right. Yeah, that's another good point. I didn't appreciate that until I had kids, right? And I realized you had to stay balanced and take care of yourself because you're not just a role model, right? You're the caregiver, the provider. You have to uh, be intentional with with your time and
So much. Like there's certain points where if I know like what is it called? May December. That's what everybody at school calls May. It's like May, but really December. And it's like school ending, Mother's Day. We have two birthdays in our household. So like for me, I know I can't take like a monster project that's due in May. It's just not within my wheelhouse right now when I have like two tiny humans to also be
right,
present for, right? So when we're busier, we're not as present. Our temper, or not even temper, but temperance is shorter.
right. Yeah.
And that isn't, the kind of energy I want to put into the household, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something, particularly in this day and age of instant gratification, I'd say having kids is one of the things that helps grow your patience muscle the most.
still working on it.
Yep.
I've been an entrepreneur for so long and I've had a lot of staff always, right? And so usually like my staff jokes, like, when did she want it done? And everyone's like, well, if she's asking for it, she wanted it like yesterday.
Yep.
And unfortunately, the kids don't really function in that way.
Right. Sara, so what do you wish you knew sooner in your career about building wealth and success?
Okay, so I did one of my first major company sales back in 2018. And I closed on a multi-million dollar transaction in December without, my accountant and a tax attorney looking at kind of how to structure and where things went.
Right.
So I think that was the hardest lesson that I've learned in the industry, or not even in the industry, but as a business person. The industry was this thing that people really didn't understand when I got into it. So I didn't have the luxury of having a mentor. Like anytime I tried to bring in somebody smarter than me or like a CEO or a COO, they were like, no, that's not how it works. And I'm like, no, but it is how it works in the industry. And so if you can't get over that, like you're not a fit. And so I felt like I did make a lot of mistakes because I never had I just didn't have mentors. I didn't have people that were like, oh, this is how it goes. Like we were paving the path. We were in a new industry. And so that was probably the hardest lesson that I learned because it hit my pocketbook pretty hard. And I'll never make that mistake again. But I've learned hundreds of lessons in the industry and I really wouldn't take any of them back. It's, how I became who I am today.
Right. Those are seminars, and some of them are more expensive than other ones.
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay. Sara, if people like to connect with you or learn more, where can they go? What should they do?
I have a personal website, saragullickson.com, or my cannabis business is thecannabisbusinessadvisors.com. But if you really want to find me, just Google Sara Gullickson. And even if you botch my last name, I think I'll come up.
All right. Son of Gullick. What is that? What is the heritage of that name?
Norwegian.
Is it?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm from Minnesota. I'm Fergestad. That's a Norwegian name too.
Right. So when my father was going to marry my mother's not Norwegian. She's like kind of like a mutt. And Norway wrote a letter to my father's family and said, like, you're going to basically like mess our lineup if you like marry this person that's not Norwegian. True story. Oh wow. So I guess I'm a mutt now too.
Yep, like most of us in the US.
Yes, right.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you, Sara. Thank you everybody for listening and watching. Thank you very much, Sara Gullickson, for joining me today. I very much appreciate you sharing your insights into the cannabis industry and your own personal journey. That's been not just educational side. It's been entertaining. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I hope so. I always aim to be entertaining. Thank you for having me.
Inspired by our guests? Visit phoenixprosperitypodcast.com/guest and join us on the show and share your success story with Tim. The spotlight awaits.